Renewables for the Tracy Solar Project, which is in the towns of Clayton and Orleans. And at this time, maybe we should go around the room and do introductions. My name's Paul Warnick. I'm a board member, and I serve as the chair of the Alternative Energy Committee.
Bill Johnson, I'm on the board here for the IDA.
Marshall Weir, Deputy CEO, Jefferson County Economic Development.
Dave Converse, I'm on board of JCIDA.
John Jennings, a board member of the IDA.
Ed Waldrop, board member, IDA.
Barry Kerrigan, partner Nixon Peabody, representing EDF Renewables.
I'm Jack Honor from EDF Renewables, Director of Development.
Peggy Sampson, staff member.
Lyle Eaton, CFO.
Chris Powers on the board and the Energy Committee.
Probably also chairman of the IDA board.
Okay. Well, you submitted a preliminary application, and I think Dave sent some requests out from information, which I believe some of these documents are for. So I guess I'd turn it over to you to start your presentation on the project, and then we'll go to questions and answers if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure.
So we submitted a draft application, and if you have any questions on that, again, feel free after. We've also got a map package. I know people always like to dive into where these are located. So that map package, it's multiple pages. The first one is the overview, and then you can kind of zoom in. And then we just have a short presentation. The goal that I had for this meeting today was to just introduce ourselves, introduce the project, answer questions. At this time, we're not proposing a financial offer. We did prepare the draft application with all the information except for that. And so our plan is, after we have this introductory meeting, we're going to sit down with the towns and in collaboration with you guys and the towns, try to come up with a financial offer that's agreed with everyone, and hopefully submit the full application sometime later this year. So we're EDF Renewables. We had a couple of slides on us, who we are. We're one of the largest developers and owner operators of renewable energy projects globally. We build a little over a gigawatt or so every year. So last year, at 1.1 gigawatts, healthy mix of wind and solar. We also do battery energy storage and EV chargers. We have a very large pipeline in New York State, so this is just one of many projects that we have. A number of them have contracts with the state of New York and are moving forward. Others are more in development stage or in permitting stage. And then we do own the Copenhagen Wind Project, which is in Lewis County, but a very small piece of it. The transmission line is in Jefferson County. So the Tracy project, it's 119 megawatts. As you know, it's in the town of Orleans and the town of Clayton. Say probably about 65% is in the town of Orleans, maybe 70%. And then a little bit less in the town of Clayton. We began this project in 2018 and secured a contract with the state of New York last year. Our total investment is, including the battery storage, is $179 million. As you'll see in the application, the battery storage is about $6.5 million of that. So without battery storage, it'd be like $172.5 million. So we have a 20-year agreement with New York State that we won last year. We have all of the leases and easements signed, and one purchase option. That's for our substation. It's required that we purchase it by National Grid. We submitted a permit to the State Office of Renewable Energy Siting, the new 94C permit, and that's going through completeness review right now. I imagine maybe in another 2 months or so, we could be deemed complete there. We'll have a new substation built to connect the project to the transmission line that runs kind of north-south through the area. And again, the reason why we're doing business in New York State is because we have the state has a 70% by 2030 renewable energy goal. So all these projects are helping to further that goal. We just got a slide on the location. I know we have the maps, but just zoomed out a little bit, you can see just south of the village, and the town line kind of runs right down the map between the We completed a very robust suite of environmental engineering studies. Again, we submitted that 94C permit. All that's available to view online. If any of you are interested later, we can send you a link, or it's also linked on our project website as well. We submitted $119,000 in intervenor funding, which was split between the town of Clayton and the town of Orleans to support attorneys' fees and engineering studies, stuff like that, anything the town wants to do in reviewing our application. We ended up with almost no jurisdictional wetland impacts. We had to cross one, so it's 0.02. So we're happy about that low impact number. We do have to do a grassland bird conservation project because some of the area was deemed as habitat for grassland birds. So we have to do a 167 acre project, and we don't have an agreement with the Thousand Island Land Trust, but kind of a handshake that's who we're going to work with to do that project. And that would also be in Jefferson County more than likely. We've got visual buffering for neighboring property owners. We've met all the noise requirements. We have decommissioning, letter of credit proposed, and we were able to meet, I'd say 95% of all the local law for both towns, but we did have to request 1 or 2 waivers for, I think, if we were to dive into them, they're more common sense issues. For agriculture, we recognize that there are competing interests in New York State between what we do and keeping agriculture viable and supporting it. And so what we're happy to report is that this project does not impact any prime farmland. There are 12 acres of prime farmland within the parcels themselves, but where those 12 acres reside is not overlaid by panels, if that makes sense. And again, we're part of our business, and what we think is something we want to focus on in the future is what we call agrivoltaics. So that's incorporating agriculture activity into our projects. And we've actually spoken to a number of farmers in the area who are already doing that for smaller projects and are interested in doing that for this project. So we think as we roll forward and this becomes a little more mature, we can start getting those types of agreements signed to incorporate sheep farming and maybe even honey production or bees into our project area. Decommissioning, as I'm sure you probably heard from lots of other companies, that's an important component of this. So we have a third-party decommissioning estimate in our permit. We propose to post a letter of credit plus a 15% contingency, and then that's adjusted for inflation over time. Talk a little bit about job creation and economic development. So we estimate 167 FTE for this project. All of the labor will be either union or prevailing wage, and we do have agreements with the laborers union right now, working on agreements with IBEW and the operating engineers, some of the other unions, to do all of that work. So that's kind of a differentiator there between us and maybe some of the smaller projects you guys have looked at. We do estimate 3 to 4 full-time, high-paying operations and maintenance jobs. So that's 1 site manager at 110 to 130 and 2 solar technicians, maybe 3 solar technicians at 80 to 100. And those people need to reside locally because they need to provide 24/7 response to potential issues. And then, of course, there are local vendor and subcontractor opportunities, in the hospitality industry, some of the associated general construction work, material supply, and then also education opportunities for local schools, community colleges, and things of that nature. And then this is just kind of an overview of the community benefits from a financial perspective. Obviously, the pilot property tax host community agreement is a piece of that. We also have an electricity benefit program that's mandated by New York State. That's $500 a megawatt, and that's split equally among every residential electricity customer for 10 years. So, we haven't run the numbers yet, but it could be $10, it could be 20, 30. I think that's the kind of range we're looking at here. So again, it's not a huge number, but it does that benefit does impact everybody equally because everybody's eligible for it. They don't have to do anything, it just shows up on their bill. We do have a charitable giving program that we've committed to, $20,000 per year, beginning at construction. And what we'll do is we'll hire a local committee, 2 to 3 people, can take, suggestions or ideas, applications for those funds and disperse those funds every year. We won't make the decisions on who's eligible for the money. We want that to be done by the local residents. And then, of course, lease payments over $24 million for the estimated life of the project. So that's all I have. I tried to kind of go through it quickly. Again, we just wanted to introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit about the project and just kind of have a discussion. Maybe I try to understand your process a little bit better.
Okay, well, I'll start with a couple questions I have written down here. So you have pilot property tax and host community agreements. Have you negotiated host community agreements, or are they negotiated by the ORES?
We intend to consider using host community agreements as part of the overall package. They are not negotiated yet, and ORES will play no role in that whatsoever.
Okay, will they be negotiated with all the parties together or just singularly with the town? Our issue has been in the past that, we look at the total package as we talk pilot taxes, and in the past, it could have changed, but in the past, the agency has had problems with individual negotiations with, let's say, a town versus everyone knowing what those negotiations are, because, we're talking the total package. Town, school, and county needs to know what the total financial package is, and I believe that every taxing jurisdiction should know what others are getting out of a financial package if we offer one. Just a thought.
But I think the problem that we have here is that the town of Orleans has a 0% tax rate. So we know going into a pilot where they're going to have to modify the distribution of funds. That's a deviation. I mean, this whole thing's a deviation, right? But we want them to receive.
They also have a special district tax that you're going to have to pay for their highway department.
Yeah,
which
but
is they
it's-
fund their highway through a special district tax.
That is correct.
So, and we've already done a smaller facility in the town of Orleans. So I'm not saying we would be opposed to an alternative distribution, but that's going to come down to all the taxing jurisdictions and agreeing to it.
Yeah, so
why-
that's where we look at it, either, if changing the split is not desirable or
Mhm.
possible, then you could use a host community agreement instead. And,
Okay. Just be aware
To your
that
issue,
we're sensitive
full
about
transparency.
everyone
Yeah.
understanding what everyone is getting out of a proposed deal.
absolutely, yeah.
And ultimately, anything that we negotiate in terms of pilot is going to be a deviation. It's going to require approval by all the taxing jurisdictions, because our UTEP tax exempt policy currently allows for projects employing the utility scale project your size are outside UTEP, which already making the deviation that we need approval for.
Okay, in your application, you provided the lease. As you know, the state has established a new valuation model for valuing these. Is the amount you put in there the actual lease amount, or is it in that range?
That was the sort of lease payments you're talking about in that we
What-
put
what-
the construction costs?
For the underlying lease payments,
Yep.
To the land.
you had a 650. Is this public information or application at this time? I don't want to get into
It's not an
the,
official application yet, so no, so I think we asked what they're willing to share publicly.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you put in there 650. Is that what, because we're trying to gather all the information needed because we have to justify what the project's worth. Also, we're trying to gather the information that the municipalities may need for their officials to use the new model. So we need to know we don't need to know individual lease payments.
Yep.
But we need to know the aggregate lease payments, and is there an escalator on the lease payments, because those are two of the factors that are put into the valuation model. So when you get to the final application, we'd be looking for the actual aggregate amount and if there's a lease escalator.
Yeah, I think
That is accurate. Yeah,
Okay,
but we'll have to add the escalator.
okay,
And,
that's fine.
It's accurate as of today, right? You know, we pay by acre. So
Okay.
on the final design, it might be 10 acres more, 10 acres less, but that is
That's not
accurate based
gonna,
on today.
10 acres more or less is
Sure.
not gonna change the output for what we have to do to show the benefits.
Right, because ultimately, we have to show the benefits to a project.
And
You gotta
We have
compare
to
it
look at that
against.
state value, that says, here's the full value, here's what we're doing in the pilot, what's the difference in terms of the benefit?
Okay, on the decommissioning plan, I've been through a lot of your documents on the ORES site. And in your decommissioning plan, you asked for a zoning waiver. Has that been granted yet on the? You asked for several variant changes from local ordinances.
Correct.
And one of them was what the town of Clayton had for
Mhm.
decommissioning bond amounts.
Yeah.
Okay, has that been approved yet, or don't you know?
No, we have to wait for the application to be deemed complete, and then we would enter that process where they would look at those and rule on those.
Okay, so one of my concerns would be for not only that, but the other requirements. I think you asked for a setback requirement for participating landowners, which I understand. Do you intend on getting approval from the town, or at least a sign off on if the state waives those? I know the state has the authority to waive it, but one of my concerns is if it's a significant waiving of what the town wants, is that going to impede pilot negotiations?
I think you'd have to ask the towns their opinion. We've had discussions with them when we talked about a number of these issues.
Okay.
They generally agreed that the waivers were reasonable, at least most of them.
Okay.
I mean, Ben is on the phone. He represents the town of Clayton.
Well, I think that's important for us to understand here.
I
At
think
that
if you
point.
read them, a lot of them are common sense, like clarifications. Local laws are written to give planning boards discretion.
Mhm.
And when you go to ORES, it's black and white, you know, there's none of that. So we oftentimes have to ask for waivers of things that seem silly, but it's because the law is written to give a planning board discretion, and that doesn't exist in the ORES process.
I understand, but part of the general municipal law requires where we take an interest in the property that they have to comply with local zoning. So that's my concern, that we don't get into that a mess in that regard. Now you you talked about, you have a contract with NYSERDA.
Mhm.
What is strike price? That's what you bid in, correct?
Yeah.
What is the strike price? Not the amount, because I saw that.
Yeah.
What, is that a guaranteed price per megawatt hour?
No, it's not. It's a extremely complex formula, and if you'd like, I can send you like a summary. But essentially, the strike price is the way it works is every month we sell our energy on the market,
Okay.
right, in real time, and we get that revenue. And then every month, NYSERDA is going to look at what they think the revenue should be, not our actual revenue, but what they think the revenue should be, based on a simple average. So like we generate during the daytime. NYSERDA is going to take a simple average of 24 hours the whole month. And so they'll look at, and they'll do an analysis. They'll say, okay, your strike price is 60. We think you should have earned about 40 on the market. So we're going to pay 20. And they do that every month. And so it's not guaranteed revenue because that doesn't take into account losses on the transmission system, curtailment of the project. You know, if the NISO says we can't generate, you know, there was just a study like last month that wind energy in greater North Country was curtailed by 15%. So it doesn't take into a lot of things so it's not necessarily guaranteed revenue. And then you might be wondering, well, what if I make more money than the strike price in a given month? Then, in fact, we owe NYSERDA a credit. A lot of our stakeholders recently, like on other projects, they were asking about inflation. You know, what if the price of energy goes up? Are you going to start making a lot more money? And, you know, the answer is no. It's actually a good inflationary hedge. And it's good for NYSERDA in the sense that if the price of energy goes up significantly, under that strike price program, they have to pay us less and less out of their funds.
Okay.
Um,
If you could send that
But yeah,
along.
I can give a short present.
Okay, the other thing we'd be looking for is installed capacity by town. Now, there's only one school district, right? Only Lafargeville Central?
Correct.
Okay.
Installed capacity by town, yeah, I can do it.
And then my only real question, are all your collection lines underground or are they above ground? Or are they a combination?
Everything on this project is underground.
Okay.
It's buried 42 inches through non-agricultural areas, and in agricultural areas, 48 inches.
Okay. Those are my initial questions. Is there anyone else that has questions?
Same general question. I used to work for National Grid. The infrastructure to get this kind of power out of the area is limited. I mean, you gotta know that. So, I mean, what are you doing to address that? I mean, is there enough capacity if we're the first people to get onto this transmission line?
If we were the first people, then yeah. But there's 3 or 4 other projects that want to do this as well. So a couple things like physically connecting to the line and delivering energy. There's availability to do that. In New York State, there's 2 forms of revenue you can get as a merchant generator. One is energy, and the other is capacity. And for you to earn capacity, you have to prove that you can deliver a certain amount of power, guaranteed basis. And the transmission lines need to have some upgrades in order for that to happen. And then additionally, National Grid actually just like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, they proposed what they call the phase 2 transmission upgrades. And it's essentially an upgrade of every transmission line in Jefferson and Lewis County. And we'll see later this summer if the Department of Public Service decides whether or not they want to allow that to go forward and fund that. But transmission is a significant issue in the region, you know.
What's the scope of the upgrade that they're going to do under that?
Basically a complete rebuild of everything.
Upsize the line size then, is that what you're looking at?
Some of them are upsized. I think frankly, they're probably taking an opportunity to rebuild transmission towers and stuff that are 100 years old in some cases. But yeah, it's a full rebuild of basically the whole system. It's mostly rebuilt lines. I think there's one a new line. So these are all public information. I can send it to the group if you like.
Well, we're going on information we received as we've gone through a bunch of these smaller projects that there's a limited amount of capacity to accept generation in the North Country.
Oh, for smaller projects, that is a really, really big issue right now. One of the key differences is that we're dispatchable. You know, the NISO can say, hey, dial yourself down to half the capacity for the next 2 hours because we've got a congestion issue. For small projects, they can't do that. They're not controlled.
Oh.
And they always get paid. And frankly, the distribution systems, there's even bigger problems there. You know, oftentimes those small projects, they can't pay for an upgrade. You know, if they get a $2 million upgrade at a substation, they're done. They can't pay that. We can afford to pay that level of upgrade, but I would also note, and I will send this around that report, there's a couple lines in there about how these transmission upgrades would allow also a lot of the smaller projects to go forward as well.
Have you had some agreements? Isn't some of that capacity that been reserved under your proposed project? I mean, they're expecting you.
Yeah,
to
we've
energize that line. To some degree, it's not. You have already established a working relationship for capacity on that line.
yeah, we're in right now. We're in the final study that's required, and we're in with 4 other projects, and they're doing a study right now on an upgrade, and we can elect not to take it. If we elect not to take it, we would not earn capacity revenue, but that's only about 5% of our overall revenues. It's kind of a complicated issue because at the same time that we have that going on, this larger proposal that I talked about is going on at the same time. So we're in a situation of like, what if they both identify the same upgrade? How does it get paid for? Do we have to pay for it? Does the state pay for it? There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty going on.
When you say you're in this with 4 or 5 other projects, are they the larger projects that are proposed in this county or region?
Yeah, it's Borlex Greens Corners, and it's the 3 projects that AES is working on, that they bought from National Grid, who bought them from Germany. I don't know the
We
names.
haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, I don't know the names of them off the top of my head.
Well, one's Riverside.
Riverside.
Maple,
Maple-
there's one that crosses the county line.
Yeah.
There's one in Lime and Brownville, and I'm trying to think where the third one is. Okay.
I have a question, and this is more, I guess, to the whole concept of solar and green energy. So if this system, which is very large, goes into play, and it goes through its life cycle of, what is it, 20 years, or what is it?
Our financial models assume 39 years.
39. So what happens at that point then?
Well,
When this block of power is generating all this power and it's displacing some, say, natural gas fired generators, are those assets idle for 39 years in case something happens to your system? I mean, what's the plan for this whole?
I think if you're talking a 40-year time horizon, I think the plan is build more transmission, build a lot of energy storage, and build a lot of projects like us. And you probably still have gas and nuclear in the mix, but I think the state would like that to go down to kind of like.
Right, but when you're saying 40 years, 39 years, whatever, so at that point in time, are you looking at, okay, the project's done, or is the idea that you just, at that point, you finish the financing of the project, but then you're along the way, you're replacing panels and you're still continuing to operate past that? Sorry.
We estimate the panels can last the full term. We do budget for 2 inverter replacements because that's the component that needs to be replaced.
This is the first I've heard 40 years. I thought their life cycles were 25 or something like that.
Yeah, I think the smaller projects are typically built with a little bit less engineering scrutiny and maybe with, and not a disparagement, maybe slightly lower quality materials occasionally.
Mhm.
Our life cycle analysis is 39 years right now. And so, and that varies, we have projects like, for example, we're working on a project in Jacksonville, Florida. The ocean air corrodes the steel. So the estimate there is not 39 years, it's 35 years. Right? So it's a regionally dependent thing. But for all of our projects in New York, the estimate is 39 years. And then our leases are 40 years from operation start. So at the end of that, we'll have to have a discussion with our landowners if we want to renew, if they want us to kick rocks and go away and they can go back to farming.
So it could go,
That's
that's
their decision.
Just, I mean, how does that work with a landowner that, I mean, say you're doing a deal with a guy that's 60 years old? You got a 40-year deal, does that carry through?
Yeah, we go
Can
to
they sell those, or
his
what?
his estate.
Yeah.
Or if he wanted to, he or she wanted to sell the property to a new owner, they could get the lease revenue,
Okay.
if they want to. I know some investment companies that all they do is buy land that has solar panels on it, just for the income. Like
Right.
you might own a strip mall or something, it's like your real estate business.
Where do your panels come from?
Typically China, India, Korea, Taiwan, those areas.
Nothing in the United States.
There's no supply in the United States at the
Not yet.
price point that makes sense. And I know you have an exciting project and there's people here in the office. I don't mean to generalize, but there's one company that makes panels that we could afford and would be suitable for this project in the United States, and they're back ordered for like 5 years. That's First Solar out of Ohio. So typically the module manufacturers in the United States are either selling to projects that have a Buy American requirement, so like for the U.S. military or the federal government, or to residential customers who are willing to pay a premium for a better product. If you have limited roof space, you might want to be willing to pay a premium for a more efficient product.
Like just one thing you said earlier, I'm just curious, when you said, so ISO can have you dial down, how do you dial down production on a solar project? Just kind of holding it at the substation?
All right, we have a control center, and you can just turn off a couple inverters.
Oh,
They can actually probably do it virtually. We have a control center in San Diego, so it looks like It's a giant room with 100 computer screens, and they got every project there. They're monitoring it. They're dialed in. But as you could probably surmise, when they ask us to do that, we're not earning any revenue.
Right, yeah.
So that's one of the reasons this project and projects in the North Country are challenging is we have to estimate the loss of revenue due to those phenomena. And if no transmission upgrades are made, that the loss of revenue is fairly significant.
How many projects have you built in New York State that are complete and operational?
About 50.
How many of them have to dial back? Is it,
All of the 50 are at the smaller scale.
okay,
Nobody's built a project this size in New York State yet. We have one that's going to break ground this summer in Livingston County. There's like a 30 megawatt one on Long Island. But across the country, we have similar projects of a similar size. And in New York State, we, actually myself participated in like the first program where they were doing the 2 megawatt stuff for, towns and cities. I did one for Ogdensburg Port Authority up there. And then we have a number of community solar projects that we've built. We just got 3 approved with Barry and some of my colleagues over at St. Lawrence County.
so on the wind project in Copenhagen, have you been forced to do curtailment there?
Absolutely.
To what
It's
percent?
not quite as bad as up here because it's a little bit further, just a little bit further south. But I would say we're probably running at, on an annual average, somewhere in the 5% range.
Of curtailment.
EDF has some big projects in Ontario, right?
Mhm.
Oh, the bigger ones there, how big are they?
In Ontario, we have like an 80 megawatt wind farm. We have a 25 megawatt solar farm that we actually built in 2009. So the panels are much smaller. So it actually has a footprint of like 500 acres. And if you remember the slide with the sheep, that's that project. We have a couple hundred head of sheep there. They've been, a local couple who lives down the street has really just built their own business out of just farming the sheep there. And we've done projects, out west in the 500 megawatt range.
So what's the purpose on a 119 megawatt facility to have 4 or 5 megawatts of battery storage? How does that play into the overall viability of the project? Not opposed to battery storage, but it seems kind of small based upon we have community solars that are 5 megawatts that are putting in similarly sized amounts of storage.
I hear you, it is small.
Is it a requirement to get
It's,
through NYSERDA to?
When NYSERDA does their procurement process, they say, you can bid with no storage, or you can bid with storage at your site, or you can bid with storage at another site. And so we bid all 3 of those arrangements. And the bid that they selected is the one with energy storage.
So when you do curtailment, is that when you dump the power into the batteries or are they kept charged all?
Yeah, it could be, but generally what you'd want to try to do is charge your batteries either when you're going to get curtailed, right? Or when prices are low, right? The difficult thing about curtailment is predicting it, because a lot of people say, well, you should just add batteries and, when you get curtailed, you can charge your batteries, but you oftentimes don't. You're unable to model with sufficient accuracy when that curtailment is going to occur. We can model very, very accurately how the generators are going to perform. You get your wind speed, how sunny it is, but you don't know how the load is behaving. How are people using electricity? How are the other regions doing? So it's very difficult to predict when that's going to occur. It's easy to model it on an aggregate, like annual basis, but in real time for our guys on site to control when it charges. Maybe we get it right sometimes, but more often than not, we're just trying to charge, at night when prices are low. Discharge during the day, usually like 3 to 6 p.m. when everybody gets home from work and starts to turn everything on.
Okay.
Something I find a little bit staggering is this development of the new upgrade on these transmission lines. This is the first I've been aware of it.
Yeah,
It's in the planning stage now. It'll move fast, but it's probably going to be 2 years minimum before any more capacity is actually going to be available, right?
Yeah, the schedule for those upgrades is 2025 to 2029. And it's billions of dollars of work. And
Well,
we don't know if the state's gonna.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reflecting back on the upgrades that the small community projects have done on transmission lines. And it's millions and millions of dollars. It's tons of employees. It's a lot of equipment moving. It's a lot of.
Yeah.
It's a lot
I'll
of
send you the
economic.
details. It could be a good job creator for up here, I would say.
We get Harry to build a transmission line for us.
Yeah.
Build one
From
in
Maine to here?
Not from Maine, but
So between now and the next 2.5, 3 years, this backlog energizing these lines is still gonna be a real struggle.
Oh, yeah, I think
Competition.
if we move forward, you know, we have a deadline of the end of 2025 with NYSERDA with our contract. If we move forward and build the thing, I think we're just gonna have to say, you know, we're gonna take it on the chin for 2 or 3 years until these transmission lines all get done.
You run at a lower rate then than your capacity? then?
No, you just know that you're not gonna make as much money as you think you should, you know. Because
You're
we're
gonna
get
expect more
curtailment.
curtailment until the transmissions. So I noticed on the state site that you were just deemed incomplete application, and the list was a lot shorter than the previous one. How long do you think it'll be before you submit the remainder of that information to get to the complete status?
I think we'll probably resubmit in about 10 days.
Okay.
We gotta create a couple maps. And,
So once you get a complete, this is probably more for you, once there's a complete application, there's a 60-day window for the state to decide, okay, we're going to deny your application, or we're going to approve your application, put out the requirements to move forward, or the permit restrictions or approvals, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then once that 60 days goes by, there's a period for public comment.
Mhm.
How long is that? How long, there's this magical 1 year, if they don't act, you get a permit, correct?
Yes.
Does that start when? That one?
When it's deemed complete, when the application's deemed complete.
Okay. So there's going to be a time frame for, let's say, a community or the public to comment on the draft permit.
Yes.
Okay.
I gotta say, we've been working on this for like 4 years. I could count the number of negative comments on one hand. I don't think, I would be surprised if we get a lot of community feedback.
I understand that, but this is a new process. Boralex has been deemed complete. So they're in that 60-day window. You're not close to it. And these will be the first ORES projects that this agency is going to actually have to go through the process as a deviation with the taxing jurisdiction. So this is somewhat new to us also. And we don't know how they're going to react. I know there's been a community group formed on the Boralex project. I haven't seen one on this project or anything like that when you look at the involved agencies or the involved parties, so. But
There is not one that we're aware of.
I have not seen it. They haven't registered, that's for sure, but, so.
nobody's seen one of these projects that
Yeah.
encompasses thousands of acres either.
You know, we've talked about it. You're not taking prime land when another project is. This one is somewhat removed from the public's view as best as better than some I've seen proposed.
We haven't seen it byway.
Yeah, so, I mean, those things you have going for you, but I have no idea what to expect from the taxing jurisdictions as we get into this, because it's going to be up to them at the end of the day what type of deal is put forward to you, so. And we have not had any meetings with them yet on any of these projects.
How should we proceed in that regard? Do you want us to let you do all of that? Do you want us to talk to them?
Well, it would be up to us. My suggestion, Dave, is once we get a formal application, that we meet first with the taxing jurisdictions to see how they want to proceed and if they want it, how they want to handle it.
Okay.
So we've had pretty good luck on the smaller ones, but they're smaller ones.
Sure. And on those, since you didn't have to go through the deviation process, has it just been sort of a more informal discussion or?
Well, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I think the state has failed with their tax cap rules to identify issues that are specifically important to school districts. Okay, where we've had problems is with the school districts and what happens when the pilot period ends and the impact on their budget, whether or not they have to do a tax cap override, then they need to get the voter approval and all those things. So where we've heard pushback on one of the five, the five community solars, looks like one project, but it's really five, has been from the schools and their concerns about the impact of the tax cap.
And it's not a financial, it's not that the numbers are and this is more the process, it messes the process up.
When it ends.
It just creates a mess for the school district trying to then communicate that to the public about why the levy's going up. But even though the levy's going up, your taxes might be going down because it's a mess. This is the way the tax cap is done.
I would think that we'll probably have more information, more issues as we talk to school districts as we get through
Yeah,
this.
the bigger the project, the bigger the payments, I think the bigger the issue is going to be.
So do I think that means at the end of the day they're a no, but I think it's just an additional challenge. And I think that's where the state has failed in this whole process, is to think about that,
Are they working on that all? Do you have any-
I mean, there's been proposals multiple times to either exclude pilots from it or to count them both in the numerator and the denominator so that you didn't run into this issue. And there's never been any sort of formal assembly support to pass a change to the tax cap. I mean, anytime you look at amending the tax cap, it sort of is like a can of worms where then other people start throwing in ideas. And so, no. There's been no appetite.
And across not just solar projects, but industrial
all
development
pilots.
agencies and projects, the issue has also been the community growth factor, or that when you take all this property and we take it, it's going to move it into the exempt section of the roll, which means they're going to show a negative growth, and they don't, even though you're dropping $1.72 on this, they're going to show a negative growth factor because they get no benefit of the growth factor in the tax cap calculation. So those are the type of things that the taxing jurisdictions are going to be concerned about.
Sure. And I think we'd be happy, obviously, to talk with them and to try to alleviate their concerns, whether it be, I mean, I know from just reviewing how you've done pilots before, you've attempted to deal with the assessment cliff at the end of these things and using a declining assessment model rather than how other IDAs sort of increase it over time. So you've attempted already to minimize the impact on taxing jurisdictions, and we'd be happy, obviously, to meet with them and discuss.
Well, you're going to get that with the new assessment model anyhow. If we did an assessment base versus a lump sum, and I'm not saying we're going to change that, but I would assume that based upon the state's model, that your values, let's say that pushes out $50 million, which is real close to what I came to for your project, okay? That's going to decline every year.
Yep.
Because they're going to depreciate them, and who knows what's going to happen with the discount rate moving forward. So who knows? But I would expect on special districts, you'd have a declining.
Oh, yeah, it declines very substantially.
Yeah.
In fact, to zero in year 26, and nobody really knows what that is all about.
It all depends.
We had somebody build us a model that was.
I'm not going to be
the
requiring
25
energy in 26 years, okay? My children may, but I'm not going to be. But
So as a
Now
next
we gotta
step,
get that cryogenic chamber operating.
that requires energy?
Oh,
I thought it was just nitrogen. So I think our steps would be, and it's going to be up to Dave and company to advise the board on how they think we should go. But my initial reaction is we're going to meet with the taxing jurisdictions first, get their comfort level, then probably bring the developer in to talk about the project, and then probably more substantial discussions with the taxing jurisdictions to come back to you with where we are.
Okay. So the question, I think for you folks and I guess for the committee too, is comfort level when you want to, how soon would you like to submit a formal application and start those discussions? How soon do you think we should want to try to start those discussions on our end.
Um,
Representative Park?
Absent feedback from you that says otherwise, I think we'd like to try to get, at least, working on, a public meeting for approval or whatever, if we get that far, or sometime in the fall. So, if we could try to sort out where we think we are and submit a formal application, I don't know, like June, July, that would be great for us.
Yeah, so the process would be, we submit the application, it'll come to the loan review committee. Then from there to the board for completeness, we do an initial authorizing resolution. We can then start discussions. We wouldn't actually do a public hearing till we actually kind of got through the negotiations. So we were actually in the public hearing, being able to say what the benefits the project's going to be.
Sure.
Going to be. So yeah, so I think if you get us an application in May or June, that'll be fine.
Did the county take official action on policy regarding large commercial solar arrays to the point where they were looking at full taxation? So there is current policy on the books right now so this project is going, or the Borlax, either one, is going to have to crack into that, right?
Possibly, depending on what we settle on for assessment and
Yeah, so if you didn't know, so
Yes.
the county's policy right now is that the county, they'll accept pilots on renewable energy projects. Is it 20 or 25? It's still 25, right, and below?
Still 25, that
Below,
one
right.
change, yeah.
Otherwise, they'll support a pilot for the school district and the town, whatever, but as long as the county is still getting equivalent under that pilot, what would be full taxation. So basically,
Is that their policy on 487 or IDA pilots?
pilots in general.
Pilots.
Yeah, and in any 487, they're gonna require you to go to the IDA for a pilot anyway, to the county level. So that's their practice. So in negotiating the pilot, we'll have the county at the table. It'll be a question of getting something that they might be willing to accept.
At the risk of getting slapped in the head by the legislative chairman, I think that's their policy, that if there's a good presentation, they may be willing to consider something else. But the reality is the public's acceptance of pilots as a general rule is waned dramatically in recent years. So any pilot outside of our uniform tax exempt policy, non-deviation pilot, is going to be subject to some more scrutiny by the county, because they accepted our UTEP as long as we move the 25 larger projects into deviation. So did I get slapped?
Not yet.
So that is their current policy. Like any policy, if there's a great presentation and the project has substantial merit, I think you have the ability to suggest that maybe they should seek something different, but that would be up to the legislative body.
Yeah, and they'd have to approve this because it's a deviation anyways.
Yes.
Yep, understood.
Which puts the onerous task back on you, or really showing, to the non-public and the non-public, the merits, the economic impact, what a good one it can be, I guess.
And I think one of the benefits you have is we are a very pro-agricultural county and a pro-agricultural agency. And you aren't taking high-value, tillable, productive land, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, to do this project, where some of the others are going to be bouncing off our concerns on high-valuable, tillable lands. They may look at that differently, so.
And generally speaking, here and moving north, 3-county area, there's opportunity to accommodate the state's growing needs for renewable energy via solar and have it a good fit. It hasn't got to be at the detriment to agriculture.
Absolutely.
There's lots of open land resources to do this.
So in terms of timing, the board meets the first Thursday of each month. And then the loan review committee meets the Wednesday of the week prior. So it might be the fourth Wednesday, but it could be the fifth Wednesday. But basically, first Thursday of the board meeting, the previous Wednesday is our committee. So if you want to start discussions at the May board meeting, you'd be getting us an application in time for the April loan review, or if you want want us to start the process at our June board meeting, beginning us by the middle of May, so we get on the committee's agenda. Put into May, so we can get on the board agenda.
I will tell you, for my personal preference, I would prefer to wait for a formal application till their application with ORES has been deemed complete. That way we know
Yes.
there's a project on it.
Yeah,
Because I truly doubt until the draft permit regulations are out, or draft permit conditions, is that a correct statement?
Yeah.
Is out, that you're gonna be able to get the taxing jurisdictions to make a final determination anyhow, till they know exactly what they're getting. But my preference would be to wait till you had your application deemed complete, and I'll leave it up to the rest of the committee.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's not far off anyway, it sounds like.
Just a question I have, is a project this size where you're consuming this much land, does the state put you guys through the SHPO process?
Probably spent $300,000 or $400,000 digging holes, looking for stuff.
Did you find anything?
You're 42 inches to bury your connecting lines. If you only got 6 inches to rock, are you gonna have to carve all those? Are you gonna?
Yeah, we'll probably have to use a rock trencher. We drilled, I don't know, 30 or 40 test holes. You know, we're in the 3 to 8 foot range, so we're hoping we won't have to trench through that much rock. But, yeah, we'll probably be doing a little bit of rock trenching.
So it's not, you don't have the option of going, varying from 42 to
If
6.
it's a very, very small area, you could make a little bit of a mound or something like that. But generally, we want to make sure that they're down there and nobody's going to hit them. 42 is the National Electric Code requirement, and then 48 is the Department of Ag and Markets requirement for when you're in active agricultural area.
They have to be concrete too?
No. We could bury them shallower if they were in concrete. But it's basically bed of sand, gravel, and then they're specialized cables. They're not that big, they're like this, but they're designed to be buried. And then we'll have a warning strip at usually like 30 inches down. So if anyone's digging, see that plastic.
Oh, really? Warning strip is usually what? Just a.
It's a wire usually,
Yeah, wire.
with like a color on it.
I see.
How about lead time for I'm assuming it's gotta be 115 kV substation, lead time on that equipment's gotta be up there.
Yeah, for the large transformer, it's about 15 months. And believe it or not, for the small transformers that are in the substation just to run the controls equipment, that lead time is like 24 months. Structural steel, 12 to 18 months. We already have the racking system in a warehouse in Nevada, so that's done. And then panels in the 6-month range.
This is a tracking system, right?
Correct.
Okay.
You can hook up with Harry Steel Supplier, I guess. He does 3 months, I don't know.
Are there any?
That's the building.
It's not steel,
Right,
it's the structural steel that you use within a substation, it's like specially manufactured. That stuff takes forever.
Are there any other questions from the public? Ben? No? No other questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, well, we'll let you go by your day. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in. Very helpful.
Appreciate it.
Recording stopped.
The recording has stopped.
Can you close the meeting
Real quickly,
Yeah.
we've had more discussions back and forth with this Chameau project, even though it's